Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Mountaineer Alliance webinar. I'm Sean Frisbee, and I'm the President and CEO of the WVU Alumni Association. I'm honored to introduce my good friend and guest for today's show, Sarah Biller. Sarah is the Executive Director of Vantage Ventures, an arm of the Chambers College of Business and Economics dedicated to helping launch high-impact and scalable businesses. Sarah is the co-founder of the FinTech Sandbox, a Boston-based not-for-profit working to provide entrepreneurs access to high-quality data sets, as well as Capital Market Exchange, a predictive analytics platform for institutional bond investors. Most recently, she served as the Chief Operating Officer for Innovation at State Street Bank's Global Exchange Division and Head of Innovation Ventures. She sits on the advisory board of multiple startups and national organizations, including FinMason, a new generation robo-advisor, Alt Options, a trading platform for Bitcoin options, Wise Trading, an FX and currency trading management platform, and Joint, a smart contract blockchain platform. Sarah has an undergraduate degree in finance from West Virginia University and is a member of our Alumni Association's board of directors. She is now focused on applying the lessons of entrepreneurship and reach of emerging technologies to build vibrant economies, especially in West Virginia. Sarah, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Sean, thank you. I'm trying to wipe a tear from that video you just showed. I think everybody's inspired by the vision of West Virginia they just saw. Can you not hear me?
So Sarah, it was just 3 years ago when we first met in Boston at that noisy coffee shop. And we were talking about some of the great things that we could do in West Virginia by connecting our alumni, by helping each other, by bringing new companies back to West Virginia. And now here you are, you're in West Virginia. How in the world did that happen?
Well, first, John, let me tell you thank you for hosting me today. I feel deeply honored and touched by the opportunity to actually tell you how that happened. I think it began can you hear me, by the way, Sean, just to make sure I'm clear? Yeah, thank you. I am in West Virginia, so sometimes the broadband gives me little hiccups. But Sean, I mean, the story really is one of our mutual kind of intellectual alignment that happened in Boston that day. I don't think that I'm dissimilar than a lot of kids who grew up in West Virginia, though I'm clearly not a kid. I still think of those childhood days so fondly. And like most, particularly in my case, seeking a career in finance and the capital markets, had to leave the state for economic opportunity. And you tracked me down, if you recall, and we ended up having a really delightful coffee, and the passion for West Virginia and the opportunity that one could make a difference in that case, in that initial conversation, for me to bring my experiences in finance and also the intersection of technology. Really, you empowered me in some ways to come back and share that through the board in subsequent conversations, and then re-engaging with the university. The opportunity to really do, I think, also what most West Virginians really want to do everywhere, which is to give back to their state, took shape in this initiative that John Chambers really began, and we're operationalizing his vision today.
Yes, so we've all heard about John Chambers, of course, former executive chairman and CEO of Cisco Systems, and we know he's a Mountaineer. And we've heard that he has come back and offered to help us in West Virginia. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, he's actually done more than offer to help. He is quite actionable, both with his time and his capital. In our case, when we talk about Vantage Ventures, you'll hear also his experience and his network. And that really, I think, stems from his own childhood experiences, growing up in West Virginia, in Charleston. And really this idea that for him, against all odds, found himself as a true leader in Silicon Valley at Cisco, operating in a very complex time through market transitions and shifts. And even through to today, if those of you aren't following John, it's really worth following his blogs and his appearances and his book writing, which I see on the screen, because he's not only a business leader, but he's become a statesman. He advises heads of state in India and France, and honestly us in this vision. And my conversations with him leading up to coming back home really centered on a very poignant point in his book. And I really want to tell people, read his book, because he said something to me that I found so ironic. And he said, you can't do the right thing for too long. And he writes about that. You do the right thing for too long. If you sit in your laurels and you don't really affect change, the world is going to pass you by. These incredible shifts, whether they be economic shifts or secular shifts. And we in West Virginia may actually have been a victim to that, right? We are the world's greatest repository of natural resources. John is inspiring us to do something more, and we'll talk about that today.
Yeah, and he talks in his book about this idea that the future of America really is dependent upon the growth of small businesses. And if we really want to grow prosperity in America, and we want America to continue to be prosperous, that we really got to grow small businesses. And these small businesses and the entrepreneurship really in America has really been centered on the coast. And I think if I recall right, when I read the book, he even says so much as, I'm going to show you how to do this, and I'm going to show you how to do it in West Virginia.
Yeah. Yeah, he takes note. He does no things too small, right? He picked us to really think about how do we create a systematic and repeatable process to develop support for small businesses. And there are small businesses in his mind too that had the opportunity to actually scale. So deeply committed to Main Street and its success, but he also challenged us, Sean, just as you said, to think about what is that next shift in the economy. And in the economy, this cycle of digitization, of course, it's been catalyzed by all of us being home and COVID, but how do we take advantage of it? Because it no longer needs to reside on the coast. And so as the mobility of people and technology, as it can be matched with capital, there's no reason why we can't figure it out in West Virginia. And so that's the journey we're on.
And so then Dean Reyes and you got together, and you're doing some work and talking about many of the great things that are already going on in West Virginia, not only at the university, but across the state. And this concept of Vantage Ventures was born. Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened?
Yeah, I honestly would love to say that was how it happened, but I think, Sean, I have to take us back to John as our origin point. The concept of Vantage Ventures and the team that has been formed around it. John invited us into his home in California. And for those who are in the startup or any of the technology arenas would recognize the names that he gathered. He gathered two West Virginians who I also believe began to lay out the vision for what is today Vantage. Brad Smith, the chairman, immediate past CEO of Intuit and chairman. Ray Lane, also a senior executive at Oracle, went on to KKR and now runs a very significant and influential venture fund called Great Point Ventures in the Valley. And he gathered us that day around. Dean Reyes was there, myself, President Gee, but also leaders in the state of West Virginia. And he literally sat us on his couch and he said, listen to the stories, listen to what made Silicon Valley great. He had John Doerr, who is arguably the today our contemporary sort of grandfather of the venture capital industry. He had John Hennessy, immediate past president of Stanford, credited with building Silicon Valley as we know it. He had Barry Eggert. I could go on. And he extended his network to us and he said, learn these lessons. Let me show you what you can do. Let me open these doors. And I challenge you to take back this community of support, because we are in a secular shift in the country. There is this desire not only to see innovative ideas rise and those that are investable, but to do so with impact. And this is your moment in West Virginia. And it is up to you to take these lessons on. And once you learn them in West Virginia, don't forget, we're going to take it to the rest of the country. And so you can see, even a year and a half later, how much those words resonated. What didn't occur to me at that moment is how hard it would be. But nonetheless, that's really our origin story and how Vantage, what you'll see, and I think we'll share our website, but what you see happening. And he reminded us frequently across that day, and still now, is that West Virginians always give back. They go first. They're not afraid of hard work, but they always give back. And that has been our case across the last we really opened our doors in October, but we have benefited from this tremendous commitment of West Virginians to see something different in their home state and at the university and apply business, networking, capital. They've come home and built businesses. We can talk about that too, but that's how it started.
When I came back to Morgantown 5 years ago now, I was surprised that West Virginia University had made a lot of changes and a lot of progress in terms of helping our students who want to be entrepreneurs. We had the launch lab set up. We had none of that back when you and I were at West Virginia, and so they had really made some great progress. But this has taken us to the next level, right? I mean, this is taking the work that had already been done and building upon those that have gone before and begin to lay that foundation and taking it to the next level. But what specifically is Vantage doing with that?
Yeah, and I think it's an important point, Sean, is that we are also deeply interwoven in an entrepreneurial community in the university that came before us. And so when you think about entrepreneurship and truly what it takes to build a business, ideation matters. What are you passionate about? What are you building? And we have the environment at the campus to explore that. In fact, that's what a university campus is, right? Someone is passionate about an idea and they unpack it through their research, or a student comes forward and says, I'm deeply committed to this idea. And we have an entrepreneurial team in our space right now called Iconic Air, who as undergrads came forward and were very driven by the intersection of IoT, the Internet of Things, data and sensors, as they could relate it to drones, and developed through their experience in the innovation ecosystem. And Sean, you mentioned it at the launch lab as undergrads, their idea of prototyping their ability to collect climate data and structure that. And they became agnostic to the collection sensor, but their real secret sauce is their ability to structure that data and analyze it and dynamically show that data and those outputs. So they came through that cycle. What we want to do is what we do is ideation and proofs of concept. Once it gets to that stage, we bring them into Vantage, and our goal really is to help them with the broader company formation strategy. Where do they find customers? If the Mountaineer Alliance wants to, have an entrepreneur come to them and talk about their evolution of technology and proofs of concept, we've got them. But really help them create a customer network. Mentorship is super critical. You have to remember, entrepreneurship is, living in Boston, I thought everybody could throw a stone and hit another startup or an investor or, an individual who would help do that. That's not always the case in our environment in Morgantown. So we help them identify mentors, and we're actively helping close the venture capital gap, which is a very, very difficult thing, because as you said, innovation has historically been centered on the coast. And so money follows opportunity. But that's our little secret sauce. It looks like a J hook when you go about it. But that's what we're doing.
Yeah, by the way, I love this new website that you have up now, and I particularly like what I'm going to call your tagline, and maybe it's not your tagline, but what we titled this webinar as turning potential into possible into impact. So where did that come from? And I guess this is really the essence of what it is that you're working on.
Indeed. Yeah. And I'll call out, you'll hear me call out names from our team. This actually came from Kelsey Kirby, who joined our team, a native West Virginian. And this notional idea, because we talk about it all the time in a normal population, and I think everyone on the that we talk to, Sean, it resonates with them. In a normal population, capability is just distributed, right? It's not concentrated on either tails. And that's a good way to metaphorically think about West Virginia. There is tremendous potential in our mountains. There's tremendous potential at the university. There's tremendous, because we see the success outside of the state. That potential is here, and we want to turn it into the possibility of, enabling people to solve very complex challenges. We do talk about it. We like to work with risk takers. We like to work with people who really, entrepreneurs who want to knock it out of the park, who see a problem that they believe is worthy of solving. So that possibility, we want to enable it. And you do that. There's really not that much secret sauce to building a company, but you have to know what the possibilities are for you. And so we want to enable that. And then we want to really drive forward and, as you can tell, create impact. So it is our own understanding. It's our personal value system and belief at Vantage Ventures that we are just, in West Virginia, we are just as capable as anyone sitting in Cambridge or in Palo Alto, London, Singapore. That potential exists.
Yeah. So is Vantage is it a virtual platform? Is it a physical space? I mean, when the folks who are listening in here, when they think about Vantage Ventures, how can they think about that?
Yeah, it is almost all of those things, Sean. It is foremost a physical space. I think we have some pictures to show. You may not recognize, Sean. Well, you recognize it, Sean, but this is what our physical space looks like. It's very tech forward. If we could go back to the preceding page, I do where the kitchen is. I was going to show that because I think this is what Sunnyside looks like now for those of you who haven't been back to Morgantown in a couple of years. It's a very contemporary 8,000 square feet. The only reason I landed us here on this picture in particular is because a kitchen is important. If you've been in a co-working space or an accelerator or incubator, most gatherings happen around the kitchen. There is a beer cooler in there, but we won't talk about that. But what we did intentionally do, and it is throughout the space, is we really wanted also to reflect back the strength of West Virginians and pay homage to the fact that, in our mountains, again, is strength. And that table that you all are looking at, that is actually was made by Gat Creek, which is a West Virginia furniture designer in the Eastern Panhandle. It's made of West Virginia hickory. It weighs about 700 pounds. And there's no greater joy that I feel than going in and seeing the entrepreneurs, and we have a distribution of ages and sectors covered, sitting around that table solving one another's problems. So, Sean, the first thing to know is that Vantage intentionally created a community where entrepreneurs and individuals with big ideas could come together. That is very resonant in other entrepreneurial ecosystems. But in addition to our space, we also provide, as I mentioned, programming around company formation. As I said, how do you pitch a venture investor? How do you read a term sheet? How do you protect your IP? And we also are very active, as you just heard me say, in the partnership arena, either partnering with young emerging startups who hold great promise. We're partnering with emerging growth companies. We have some fantastic alumni who themselves have been founders. And what we've asked them to do is, as they're expanding their team, come back and take some resident space with us. hire a team in Morgantown, help those young entrepreneurs see what it's like to work in a startup that's succeeded. So we have about, I think probably at this point, of 7 companies that fit that category of an emerging growth, an ARR of like 10 to 20 million. And then we have partnerships that we're forming with globally significant organizations, whether it's the innovation arm of a Fortune 500 company or a substantial startup, if you will, in the Series E space. So that's sort of our, if you will, what is Vantage? It's a physical space. It's an environment to where you can learn and advance your idea intentionally. And it is also a place for partnership for the university. And again, that idea of really leveraging the untapped talent and ideas that are in West Virginia, that potential.
So the companies that you have in there, those 7 or so companies, are they engaged with students? Do we see students in there on a regular basis who are, kind of have that feeling in their mind and their heart that, this entrepreneurship, the startup world is something I'm really interested in. I don't really know much about it. Are students engaging?
Yeah, we have a lot of students who flow through. But we have them in different ways than you might imagine. You mentioned the ecosystem, the entrepreneur ecosystem at the university. There is a group around this idea of a launch lab. And that really is where students can go with their idea and the formative needs that they have. We see students who come to us, as I mentioned, who are in that sort of product development, prototyping phase. We also see students, we host a lot of thought leadership, if you will, programming when we were able to be back together. For instance, last fall, we were really fortunate to have Virgin Hyperloop visit Morgantown. And this wonderful and deeply substantive welding engineer named Kristen Hammer came and spoke to about 300 students. I envy those days where they were crammed, 5 deep, sitting on the floor, listening to the possibility that, I always thought it was kind of like a Homer Hickam moment when he sat in his backyard and he looked at the sky and he's like, I'm going to build a rocket ship to go there. We had that moment. And so that's where you're seeing the energy with the students. But we want more students to build companies. That is truly our goal. We want to introduce them to tech, AI, we want to introduce them to new ideas. We want them to solve problems that they have, and we want to fund them. So come back within a year so we can answer that.
I'll tell you what's really exciting to me is this concept that, and we weren't talking Vantage Ventures 3 years ago, but what we were talking about was getting people plugged in, which is exactly what you have on your website, and thinking about how we can engage our 200,000+ alumni out there, many of which have great experience and the tech world, great experience with startups. They might be potential investors, they just mentors, or maybe they want to bring their company back to West Virginia. So I presume that this is how people get plugged in. And what kind of people are you really looking for?
Yeah, Sean, thank you for that. I on a personal note, have benefited across my entire career, right? I'm kind of like a little farm girl from West Virginia, and got to sit at the table in large transactions and in financial services. And I can't help but think throughout all of that, I drew on the mentorship and the comfort of other West Virginians. And so we absolutely, as we're thinking about what it is that we can do to help advance the university and help advance the state, by the way, this is a statewide initiative, or working across the state, is that we do open our door to individuals who see themselves with industry expertise for mentorship, or if they're interested in partnering, the university is producing some marvelous technology in the area of life sciences. Certainly, as I mentioned to you, in AI, IoT and data and sensors. We have incredible work underway in infrastructure, which expands into renewable energy and autonomous vehicles, that type of work. And then I will tell you the other sector that, like, if there's interest in, is we have a broad category that we find strength in West Virginia that we can support the entrepreneurial community around security. And security for us is not only cybersecurity, which one might imagine that's where we go to first, but we also have a tremendous amount of work being done in the state and in our entrepreneurial community around food security, supply chain, even down to blockchain. How are they tagging, and creating an identity for food security, but then also financial security and fintech. And we can talk about those categories if anyone's interested, but we definitely seek industry mentorship and partners. This is a front door for individuals who are innovators and entrepreneurs to come back to the state. We are evolving some of the thinking around how do we help that happen with incentives and mentorship and guidance. We certainly are drawing upon the success of our Mountaineer community for our early angel investing. We just came off of a really successful pitch day where we actually presented investable companies, and the lion's share of the investors who were on the line were West Virginians, and ironically, I think only 2 were sitting in the state. They were calling in from all over the country. And then I just mentioned to you, we have a really strong commitment from the state of West Virginia, which included legislation that this past fall around creating regulatory relief for entrepreneurs who are intersecting financial services and technology. And that actually we're the 4th state in the nation to actually pass a West Virginia FinTech sandbox. It attracted a lot of attention. You'll hear much more energy after the first of the year about how we'll bring in our first cohort, but we actually have inbound interest from around the country of FinTech entrepreneurs who observed that they have and they want to help strengthen our community banking system, really work around entrepreneurial solutions that advance our outdoor economy, which is thriving. And so, yeah, you can get plugged in, pick your poison here if you want to, where you want to categorize yourself. But our commitment to you as the team at Vantage Ventures is that you will get a response from us. It's not you're going into a hollow shell of which no one will write you back. We'll get back in touch with you and make sure that we channel your interests and help you succeed. But that's how you get involved.
You've already mentioned some success stories that you've had, and you've mentioned some of the companies that are coming up, but you've had some really great wins here. And I thought maybe you take a moment and talk about some of those.
Yeah, well, in our highlight section of our web page, which is we're blowing it out now, we do actively share them. We mentioned John with great affection and admiration for his commitment. I just talked about the West Virginia FinTech Sandbox. Again, I can't understate how critical that was because it showed full state leadership. We actually passed the bill in both the House and the Senate unanimously. And there's some question in the history of the state of West Virginia if we've ever had anything passed unanimously, by the way. But it just also shows the state's desire to support our entrepreneurial efforts. And then the other thing I think, Sean, I would talk about in these wins is that we are very much beginning to set the new, if you will, narrative for the state of West Virginia that's not like the narrative that we see in the popular press. And one mechanism that we're doing that with is our Real Talk series. These webinars are awesome, and I don't want to take away from them, but if anyone else is interested in what else we're doing in entrepreneurship, we do a regular live series on Facebook Live. I'll show you later the credentials to get there. But we talk with West Virginians who are entrepreneurs, who have succeeded. And we just happen to have his picture up there. One of our most recent stories and interviews that we conducted live was with Rodney Johnson of Solo Funds. And Rodney, for those of you who don't know Rodney, he is a double major from WVU, grew up in the Baltimore area, graduated and went to Ohio where he worked for P&G and developed an amazing authentication capability using sound. And that company called Lisner partnered with StubHub. If any of you own the new Jaguar or Land Rover and you walk up and you're your door handle kind of gently slides out. That's Rodney's authentication technology that's enabling that capability. He is a legitimate rock star. And what he did with his success in that environment is that he went on to found a company called Solo Funds based in Los Angeles. And it's a peer-to-peer lending environment where they are establishing new rules and new ways of thinking about credit. They're serving underserved individuals, those who are oftentimes outside of our traditional financial services sector. They're helping students close that gap. And the criticality of his work in a period of crisis cannot be understated. And they are really, I mean, he was on CNBC, and we just felt so honored to have him come talk about what he's doing. And he pointed back to his experience at WVU. He had a childhood experience, right? He grew up in a difficult environment in Baltimore, came to WVU where he was just infinitely supported for his far out ideas. And so you just happen to have him up there. But that, Sean, for me is sort of the way that we need to work together to think about, why is this even possible? Well, it's possible because West Virginians show up in the most unexpected ways, solving really difficult problems.
Yeah, it's been one of the most amazing aspects of my job is getting the opportunity and really the honor and privilege to get out there and meet just so many people. And Rodney Williams, yeah, as you know, I think he might be the youngest business school Hall of Fame member, and has won multiple national level awards. I mean, just a real rock star out there. And we've got a lot of rock stars out there.
Can I tell you a little story on Rodney, Sean? Because I think it's important for the work that we're talking about today. So I actually met Rodney not through WVU. I met Rodney through Ernst & Young has a very important conference for entrepreneurs where they intersect them with Fortune level executives. It happens in Palm Springs every year. It's not a plug for EY. This is how it happened. And so I'm out there because I have a background in fintech, and the guy at EY who had invited me, and he asked me if I would meet with this young man. And he's like, I have no idea why he wants to talk to you because he's got this audio company. It's not in your sector, not in your wheelhouse, but he keeps insisting on meeting. And so he wanted to talk about his work in fintech that he's doing right now. And it was 3 years ago. But I had no other information about him. So he sits down and he starts talking to me. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, my God, Rodney, just stop. Are you a Mountaineer? And he's like, yes, I am. I'm like, I'm a Mountaineer. This totally changes the tenor of our conversation. I'm going to go ahead and tell you whatever you need, whatever. You just ask. Everybody else, I would have been like, I don't have time. Whatever you need. That is the importance of this whole idea of aligning Mountaineers around one another. We exist. We don't always know that we are together. And you just got to get those little clues. And that, Sean, I hate to tell you that story, but it's just so relevant to our conversation. We support one another always. And for me, it resonates with Rodney just, after that.
Yeah, let me just mention to everybody out there, if you have questions and you're on the webinar site, you can click Ask a Question and pose a question for Sarah. If you're on YouTube or you're on Facebook, you can put those in the comment and we'll be happy to pull those up. I'll tell you, Sarah, I think what you're getting at is exactly what the concept of this Mountaineer Alliance that we talked about 3 years ago is all about, right? It's getting Mountaineers together. And when you get people together, when you make those connections, that's where the magic really happens. And it is a great opportunity, and it will open doors. It will open doors to people. And that's really what we're working on in the Alumni Association with the Alliance. And one of the reasons we've launched this webinar series is trying to find ways to get people connected. And so this is just one great example. And I know you've been connected to many folks throughout the years, and you've made a lot more connections and built relationships since you've been back to West Virginia. But I really do think that that is key for our future. And frankly, our alumni need it, especially during this time of COVID. And I'd be interested in your thought on this. But during this time of COVID, we're hearing from alumni, and they need help. Some are looking to relocate. Some are looking to transition. Some are looking to finally jump into something that they might feel is more meaningful. What are your thoughts on how COVID is going to impact this startup entrepreneurial environment?
Yeah, well, the overlay comment I have is that it is really accelerating entrepreneurship, and in very unexpected ways, right? It's very hard right now in this environment to be a small business owner. And so there's no doubt that I say that, and I say it with a little bit of chagrin, that we're seeing entrepreneurship thrive in the time of COVID, or really enabling teams who have a digital solution, or another, combination of capabilities that help solve for some new challenges we've never seen before. I started my last company in the wake of the credit crisis, and it was a great time to start a company because there was a real, clear, present challenge. So that's sort of my macro view on entrepreneurship. But the reality is, I think you're right. I think there are personal challenges that people are facing that have never been seen before, certainly in generations. And one of the things we've observed in our work at Vantage is that there are ways that we can continue to help and advance entrepreneurs and startups, but also recognizing that we need the experience that some individuals may have, but they've been sidelined because of COVID. And I'll give you an example. We are actively helping our entrepreneurs tap what I would call the government's venture capital fund. It was just featured in TechCrunch last week, the SBIR and STTR fund. It's a significant fund, and it does. It's not for beauty contest, by the way, entrepreneurs. It's for people solving hard problems. But we have seen awards of those investment capital. It's non-dilutive capital. We're very concentrated on getting it for our entrepreneurs, but some of the requirements our entrepreneurs aren't ready to meet, one of which is having an executive team in place. So we actually have a pretty significant talent gap right now in West Virginia when we need to go out and start like a startup CEO. And that's what these grants are requiring. The government actually makes you forces this idea of company formation because they want to take research that gets otherwise shelved and put it into the commercial markets. And so when Sean, I agree with you. I know people are hurting. How can we help find those people and intersect where applicable with these opportunities that are being created in a crisis? And I think that, to me, again, it's really part of what we need to do. It's selfishly important for us to close the talent gap in West Virginia. We have a tremendous one. I started this conversation by saying, a lot of West Virginians generationally had to leave because the opportunities weren't at home. We want to create them, and we want to create them in a way that there's a pathway forward. And so that the SBIR, STR engagement with our entrepreneurs and the requirements to have an executive team is one such example.
Yeah, that's a great way for somebody that isn't in West Virginia right now, but with the right experience and the right time in their life to come back and really help and really enjoy the experience, right? Because there's nothing better than really helping other folks. So Sarah, we had a question come in actually prior to us starting, and so let's pull that question up and see what it says. Jared asked, how can our small business, both the owner and vice president are graduates of WVU, get in the door with Vantage Ventures and work toward the mutual goal of success among West Virginia-based companies?
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but reach out to us. We are deeply committed and incented to help your company, Jared, come back into the state, really, come into our space. We have great co-working space, and also lever what you're building in a way that advances, as you said, the mutual success among West Virginia-based companies. There's no shortage of need here I feel like, for example, for individuals who are living that life of, I've been that entrepreneur across my 3 companies, never being able to let go of a problem. And that, and seeing it solved through, there's no greater reward. So we want to support you, but we also selfishly want to lever that experience you're having of building something great.
Thank you, Jared. We've got another question for you, Sarah. What kind of investment are these young companies looking for? Do they need funding? Are they also looking for talent?
Yes. So the investment, we do have companies that are raising. Most are in the seed stage investment area, but we do have some that you would call seed plus, or sort of migrating towards Series A. So we do have fundable companies, and they do need funding. They also are looking for talent, and they're looking for talent, as we mentioned, in their companies and in their executive suite. But I would argue they're also looking for talent as it relates to advisors and board members. So you have that whole continuum of support.
Fantastic. Thank you for that question. Next question. What's the best way for my company to find students to work for us? Hey, this is a great question, because I know a lot of students. We hear from a lot of students, and they're looking to find work. So what's the best way for them to do that?
Yes, depending on what students you are looking for and what course of study, the university has a point person in each of the colleges, and they're obviously extremely responsive. So if this person who asked this question, if we could get you to follow up with Sean, or however we want to take that question, we'll make sure that we connect you. That has been one of the key things that we have sought to do when we go out and seek founders who are willing to open an office in Vantage or come back to Morgantown, is that we do want them to employ, obviously, WVU students.
Okay, next question. How do we increase manufacturing opportunities or other good paying jobs in West Virginia for all residents?
We are on that. You could tune back and later in the year. We've talked a lot about, being tech forward and wanting to enter in, you've probably heard it. I haven't probably said it completely, but like enter into this, a new economy and different things. But the reality is that our work is not complete if we don't consider all West Virginians, and that we contemplate that intersection, honestly, of what's happening actually in the world. That intersection of manufacturing, robotic process automation, the need, to discover and deploy, if you want to talk about like composite materials, right? West Virginians have long worked with their hands, and they understand that the need for precision capabilities and being there when we're building things. And we as a country are returning to building things. What we see as a vision is making sure that we look for the entrepreneurial activities who are intersecting tech with manufacturing. So please know that we're not leaving any of those stones unturned. I wouldn't be a good West Virginian if I didn't care about my neighbor.
Okay, we'll take one more question. Let's go ahead and put that one up. Samuel asks, is there funding opportunities for a startup company registered in West Virginia, but initial operations in a foreign country? The market is ready and huge in this foreign country.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Our funding thesis is that we are investing in companies who are coming to West Virginia, not just registered, but coming to West Virginia to build an operating environment. I think we would recognize that we're a global economy, and if that work and those sales were in a different geographic region, there's, that's great. But I think for now, where we are in this nascent stage is that we want to see activity happen in West Virginia. So not just registered, I might add. We've got plenty of those that are registered. So give us a call, though. I think that's probably, I hate to be that flippant, but we should have a conversation.
Sarah, there's one more I really want to ask. And this came from Michael. And what he's asking is his company is looking to bring some manufacturing back to the U.S. They currently have some manufacturers they utilize in other countries like China, but they'd really like to see what they could do in West Virginia and whether or not there's companies in West Virginia that could help them. How would they get in contact? How would they figure out if they could source their products from West Virginia?
So, Sean, just to be clear, are they themselves looking to create a manufacturing environment?
No, they're looking to source. So right now they have manufacturers in China. They'd love to bring them to onshore that manufacturing in West Virginia. And the question is, are there companies that could do it for them?
Yes, we have actually at the university, the West Virginia Consortium of West Virginia Small Manufacturers Association. We've had a chance to work with them on some of our various initiatives. Most recently, the acting director of that group, her name is Stacy Miller, and they are very responsive of helping connect all the way up and down the value chain, from two-person, machine shops who are building. I was tickled. There's a team in Green Bank who, because of the National Observatory, the uniqueness of the configuration of the dishes, there's actually a two-person manufacturing operation in a family barn who's like making like the lug notes for those things. So, you do have a tremendous amount of capabilities and historical precedent. So I would encourage them to get in touch through the university with the West Virginia Small Manufacturers Association, who has first-person relationships with those types of firms. I'm amazed at what's being built in West Virginia.
And we can help with that. If somebody really is looking for something like that, reaching out to the Alumni Association, we can get you in contact with the right folks. And I know we have some other questions. We're running out of time, so we will take those questions and we'll get those questions to Sarah and get those questions answered for you. But I've got one more question for you, Sarah. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you a question that I always ask our alumni when I meet with them. Okay, are you ready for this one? All right. If you could go back and relive one moment from your WVU experience, what would that one moment be?
You're asking me to like, you know what, Sean? I actually, you know what I would have done? I just realized this. If I could relive one moment, it would actually be probably the moment that I decided to change my major.
Wow.
Yeah, it would. I think I might have actually stuck with engineering. As opposed to, I made the easy shift to finance. But I think in hindsight, if I could relive that moment and listen to my future self, I'd like to be able to really build stuff. Right now, I know how to make money, but I don't know how to build a bridge. And so that is a bit regretful. But there's always time, right? You're an engineering grad. You would probably tell me I could figure that out.
I've always said we never have enough engineering grads out there, right? So that's what the engineers always say. So finally, how can someone follow this exciting work that's happening at Vantage, maybe on social media? Is there a way to follow you?
Yeah, I would ask, actually, we organized ourselves to make sure we could answer this question because we do have a very expansive social media presence. We're growing it. I shouldn't say it's expansive, but please follow us on Facebook so you can learn about our real talks and other aspects of our entrepreneurs and what we're building. We have an active Twitter feed, and then of course at LinkedIn, where we're establishing a sort of a network there where we find professionals from all over the country, not just West Virginians, have started following us.
That's fantastic. Well, Sarah, on behalf of all of Mountaineer Nation, I just want to say thank you for the effort that you've put in to come back to West Virginia, you putting your time, your talents into helping us be better. Thank you very much. And thank you for being with us today. This was fantastic.
Well, thank you. See you soon.
With that, we'll wrap up for today, but I'm hoping we'll continue this conversation on another Mountaineer Alliance webinar I want to thank Sarah again for taking some time to speak with us this afternoon. And thanks to all of you who joined in the conversation and asked us questions. We'll be continuing the WVU Alumni webinar series throughout the fall with a number of interesting topics. So make sure you stay up to date on all of our events on WVU Connect at wvuconnect.com or by downloading the WVU mobile app. Many thanks to Andrew, Justin, Ray, and our alumni team who are behind the scenes making sure today went smoothly. And a final and special thanks to all of our members of WVU Alumni Association. Without your support and contributions, we wouldn't be able to host programs like our webinar with Sarah today. If you're interested in becoming a member, be sure to visit our website, alumni.wvu.edu, for more information. We'll see you next time. Let's go.